Hello again, you're live with BBC News. The €400 billion question. China's massive trade imbalance with Europe looms large as Beijing hosts EU leaders for talks. Also coming up, more pain on the way. The Bank of England says the full effect of higher rates is yet to be felt, but households and businesses are coping for now. Plus, ripe for transformation, how developments in AI are starting to bear fruit in the push for more sustainable agriculture. Hello, if you've just joined us, I'm Sally Bundock. We're looking at the top business stories, starting in Beijing, where China's President Xi Jinping is hosting European Union leaders for their first in-person summit meeting since 2019. And there is one huge number that is looming over these talks, €400 billion. That is roughly the size of China's trade surplus with the European Union. So the difference between what they sell to Europe and what Europe sells to China. So European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says it's because of China's unfair support for its industries, which means its products are flooding global markets and threaten to undermine Europe's industrial base. China says that the complaint doesn't make sense when the EU stops it from buying certain sensitive technology such as advanced chips. The head of Europe's business lobby group in China has told the BBC today the talks are long overdue.
We have had 3-4 years with basically no engagement face to face, and it's important that the two sides begin to rebuild trust. We have seen over the past 10 weeks, we are having 7 commissioners coming to China, and now a second visit from Ursula von der Leyen. We think that is very, very positive. We are not perhaps expecting too much in terms of concrete outcomes, but we think it's very, very important that Europe begin to articulate what some of the big pain points are here under a very lopsided trading relationship, looming Chinese enormous overcapacity, and of course also Russia's war on Ukraine.
Well, let's discuss this with Fabian Zulig, who's chief economist at the European Policy Centre think tank in Brussels. Good to have you on the programme. So we've outlined some of the key issues and the key sticking points between these European leaders and China. Your thoughts on how this in-person meeting will go today?
I think firstly, it's very important that the in-person meeting is taking place. It has been a while, and there are many issues which have to be discussed between the EU and China. And certainly the economic relationship, including the trading relationship, is a very big issue for both sides. Certainly for the EU, China is an important market, maybe the most important market. But also for China, it is important to have a healthy relationship. So in principle, there is a shared interest, but of course, there are a lot of concrete sticking points. So I think this is much about starting the dialogue again, making sure that we are talking to each other, but not necessarily finding immediate resolutions to the issues which are there.
But when it comes to what will be achieved on the European side, what do you expect? Because does not China sort of hold most of the cards here? I mean, we've mentioned the fact that, of course, Ursula von der Leyen herself, she's been fairly critical of China and how it subsidises industry, for example, in the electric cars market. But really, you know, of course, strong language, but to what extent does that really help Europe?
It's important that these issues are put on the table, and that we also do follow up on the principles which have been also very much emphasized by the European Union over the years, that we need a level playing field, that there needs to be free market access also for European firms in China. And there needs to be a finger pointed at concrete circumstances where we can see that actions from the Chinese side are not helping with that fair access. But it is true that China has, of course, economic power in this relationship. But we shouldn't forget that also for Chinese firms, it's very important that this relationship with the European Union functions, that there isn't too much friction, because this also has an economic impact on China at a time when it seems like the Chinese economy is also not going too well.
Okay, thank you so much for your take on all of this. Let's now go live to Berlin and speak to Dr. Holger Schmieding, Chief Economist at Berenberg. Good to see you, Holger. So what's your take on this and these meetings going on? Because, of course, Germany is in a very difficult position economically, and its car industry is at the heart of that. China's a huge competitor. What does Germany want out of this relationship?
Good morning, Sally. Of course, Germany out of this relationship clearly wants better access to the Chinese market, better subsidies control in China to have a more even playing field, a more even trading relationship. But in all this, we should not forget that China, as the still much, much poorer country, actually needs commerce with Europe, including Germany, more than vice versa. So Europe can self-confidently go to China and discuss with the Chinese what the Chinese have to change in order to improve the relationship. China's economy is struggling by Chinese standards quite badly. So it's interesting to see in the last few months that China has actually sent signals to Europe that they would like to patch up their commercial and to some extent political relations.
Do you think actually the position that all these economies are in, i.e. China, you've just mentioned the weak position it's in, but also Germany, I mean, it's expected Germany will stay in recession for the rest of this year, means that they are that much more likely to want to come up with agreements on trade and move forward as opposed to putting up barriers?
Well, Germany would like to come up with agreements on trade, but Germany has learned the very hard way from its relationship with Russia that we have to be cautious, that we have to de-risk our relationship, that we should not be too dependent on some single supplier of some critical things. So in Germany, to some extent, there is an awareness that in trading relationships, we also have to consider the very big picture, including national security concerns, which of course is something to be told to the Chinese as well. Don't even try to do something nasty to Taiwan, because that would lead to a disruption of trade, which would hurt you, the Chinese, more than it would hurt Europe. So unfortunately, there is a lot of politics that has to be involved, and which to some extent, even for Germany, having learned the Putin lesson the hard way, now is more important than the mere commercial aspect.
Just very, just very briefly, Holger, Luis Inacio Lula da Silva has just been to Germany, a meeting with Olaf Scholz. Of course, that trade relationship between Brazil, Germany, extremely important. The Mercosur leadership summit is happening in Brazil now, and it was hoped that the EU and Mercosur would come up with a trade agreement there. But it looks like that's not going to happen either, doesn't it?
It probably won't happen now, but there is still a bit of a chance that it could happen shortly after the new Argentinian president takes over, because this political uncertainty about the position of Argentina is now a major stumbling block. And of course, having a big trade deal between the EU, including Germany, and Mercosur and Latin America would be a great help, or a significant help, in the European strategy of de-risking its Chinese dependence.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Holger Schmieding, thank you. Good to see you from Berenberg. Let's now take a look at